Welcome to this video about NWEA MAP Fundamentals. We will be discussing some MAP testing basics, a little about MAP scores, and some norms and percentiles used in MAP. Let's begin with our MAP testing basics. We will be taking a look at basic MAP information, how MAP tests are different from other achievement tests, and the process of MAP testing itself. Remember that MAP tests are designed to measure growth, and they are designed to measure growth at the student's current level of skill or understanding of the Illinois Learning Standards. Now, these tests will contain questions that measure skills and understandings that are in the Illinois Learning Standards. However, the tests are not necessarily grade level aligned. They are tailored to what students show they can do, even if they haven't been taught it yet. That means you could see during MAP testing a student answering questions concerning material that they have not seen before and could be several grade levels above where they're currently at. That's okay. The test is trying to find out, can they do it? This also means that students can take very different tests while sitting in the same room. It all depends on how students are answering the questions. Remember that MAP tests are adaptive tests. If students continually answer questions correctly, they will be getting harder and harder questions. If students answer questions incorrectly, they will get easier and easier questions. So let's say you have a student and they sit down to take a MAP test. At what level do students start when they take MAP tests? Well, that depends if a student has MAP tested before in our district. If they have, they're going to start where they left off the last time they took a MAP test. For example, let's say in the spring they have a score of 212. Well, that's where they start in the fall, meaning they get questions at a 212 level to begin with. Let's say in the winter, they leave off with a 245. Well, that's where they're going to start in the spring. They're going to get questions at a level of 245. If students are new to MAP testing in our district, it will start them at the median of their grade level norms. How are MAP tests different from other what we call static achievement tests? Well, remember that MAP tests are adaptive, as we just explained. Static achievement tests, however, are non-adaptive, meaning all students get the same questions, whether they get them right or wrong. MAP tests and static achievement tests, they both measure skills and understanding of the Illinois Learning Standards. However, MAP tests measure growth because they are given multiple times a year. Also, they are not strictly at grade level, whereas static achievement tests are aligned to grade levels. MAP tests sees what students can do on information they may not have seen before. Whereas static achievement tests, the assumption is that students have been exposed to all the test content before. Let's talk about the process of MAP testing. Remember that the goal of MAP testing is to find the student's instructional level. That is the level at which they are ready to acquire specific skills and content. You're going to find that in something called the Student Profile Report. If you go into that report in MAP, you need to find the area called Instructional Areas. That is going to give you what skills they are ready to learn. We will be discussing the Student Profile Report in more detail in a later video. Also remember that during MAP testing, the tests are designed so students get 50% of the questions wrong. The test does not want them to get it all right. It needs to find the upper level of students' instructional ability. So students need to be prepared for this when they take a MAP test. They need to know ahead of time they're going to see questions they may not have seen before. They need to do their best to answer them and then move on to the next question. Let's discuss some MAP score basics. I want to go over a yardstick analogy in terms of MAP writs, and I also want to talk about what I call the MAP grade level myth. Let's say you measure the height of all of your students in your class with a yardstick. I bet you're going to find they're all going to be different heights. A few might be the same, but they're going to be different. Students in your class also might be the same height as students in the grade above or the grade below. The point is, height really doesn't depend on grade level, and neither does writ. Students across grade levels can have the same writ. There really is no grade level in MAP testing. If you recall, it's all about instructional level, what skills they're ready to acquire. Students can only be compared to the fall, winter, and spring means of the norm group, not a grade level. For example, you have a 4th grade student who has an overall fall RIT on the 2 through 5 math test as a 212. You can say, after looking at that score and comparing them to the norms, that they are performing like a typical 5th grade student in the fall. You cannot say they are at a 5th grade level because you're comparing them to the performance of a norm group. So you instead state they are performing like a typical 5th grade student in the fall. So since we've started talking about norms, let's delve a little deeper into norms and let's move on to percentiles. First of all, what do I mean by norm? What is a norm group? It's a large representative sample of the population that's going to be taking the test. In the case of MAP testing, we are talking about millions of students in the norm group. This group will take the test and their performance is measured. And then other students' performances at other districts on the test are compared to that norm group. Be aware that MAP does re-norm every few years. New ones are coming in the fall of 2018. Our current norms are from 2015. Here you'll find a picture of those norms we were talking about. These happen to be the mathematics student status norms. What you need to know is that norms, again, are not grade level benchmarks. This is how the norm group performed at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year for each grade level. They are used for comparative purposes only. Let's revisit that example. Our 4th grade student with the overall fall RIT on the 2 through 5 math test at a 212. We can say they're performing like a typical 5th grade student in the fall. The other way to say this is that they're performing almost like an end-of-year 4th grader. So again, you're taking their score and comparing it to the norm group. It is not a grade level benchmark. Now, these MAP RIT scores that we've been talking about have corresponding percentiles. Percentiles are sometimes used for placement in District 12, which is the reason why we're discussing them in this video. The norms that we talked about on the previous slide are usually around the 50th percentile. You need to know this about MAP percentiles. All MAP percentiles are grade, subject, and season specific. Well, what do we mean by that? Let's take our 4th grade student again. Let's again use math. Let's say their fall RIT is a 216. In the fall, that percentile is the 85th. However, in the spring, to be at the 85th percentile, they now have to get a RIT score of 228. This is the reason why, for placement purposes, it is not best practice to use the fall RIT. We want to use the spring RIT. Also for placement, it is best practice to use the data point closest in time for that student's entry into the program. Usually students enter programs in the fall, so we will use spring RITs and spring percentiles. So in sum, we've taken a look at some MAP testing basics, we've talked a little bit about scores, and a little about norms and percentiles. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact Terry or contact your building principal.